In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So one of the things you can be certain of in all of the lectionary years is the closer you get to Easter, the longer the readings become, or at least the gospel reading. I mean, if you remember last year, we were going through John, and it was like they kept getting longer and longer. It's one of those things that occurs, and in the season of Lent, we also seem to get those readings that stand alone. And this is a parable from the Gospel of Luke, which is in no other gospel. I think Christianity would be would miss something deeply if this parable had never been recorded. I think it is one that is profound, and it has been reflected upon a lot. It's probably one of the best known parables. Am I looking? Yes. And there's one of the versions of it. It's been used in art. Sometimes they focus on the father and on the prodigal son. And one of the things that sort of amazes me, I'm not sure where the older brother is. Now this morning I just want to talk to you, probably focus more on the older brother. So I'm here to be an advocate for older brothers and older sisters and that sort of thing. In my family, birth order, just to let you know, I was sort of both. I was the third child, but the oldest son. And if anybody's got an Irish father, you know that mixes all the birth order stuff up. And this particular parable, I tend to think of more like a letter that Jesus is writing. And he has some other parables between the opening that we get. And I will also tell you that if you read in the opening, you'll understand that this letter was addressed to the Pharisees and the scribes, but it was also something that was to be heard by the sinners and the prostitutes, the tax collectors. So I just want to let you know, from the perspective of the sinners, tax collectors, and prostitutes, you're probably going, rah, this is a great letter, I love it. It's all about me. And they, by the way, because they had been sort of chastised and excluded from proper society, it seems that Jesus is one of the primary parts of his ministry, at least as told in the Gospel of Luke, was to call the people who'd been sort of cast aside from the people of Israel back into community. If you read the Gospel of Luke, you'll find out there are lots of situations where Jesus is addressing that particular part of the people. But he doesn't eliminate or exclude the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious leaders. It often sounds like he's breaking bad on them, but I want to get into that. I think of this as more of a letter, partly because I got to read a letter this week. So one of the things that will happen is you'll hear in the prayers that my wife's mother died this past week. It's a sad moment. She led a long and fulfilling life, and one of the things that happens when your parents die is you get to go through their stuff. And you begin to find all the secret things about them that maybe you didn't know. And one of the secret things we got to find was a letter that my mother-in-law had written to the grandmother-in-law of my nephew. He was the first to get married in the family. He was the oldest grandchild, and he was getting married to a young woman, and my mother-in-law thought it would be really important to sort of fill in the gaps, because they'd never met, the in-laws, each other. I think they finally met at the wedding. I was working that weekend. I just want you to know I missed it. But it was such a lovely letter about her background and then her brag sheet on her daughters and her grandchildren. And what was amazing is that she was able to encapsulate, like Jesus does in a parable, amazing sense of the character of the people she's talking about in just a few words. I thought it was really funny that one of my children, she told the grandmother-in-law, don't play cards with her. she always wins. Now, this is coming from a woman who was playing bridge up until like 6 months ago and was winning. She was a card player, and it was not a slight against the child that she was speaking about. She was just so amazed by her fierceness and desires. And if you read each note about each grandchild, and she had a lot of them, it's just amazing to see the wonderful sense that she had of each one of them. And she wanted the grandmother-in-law to know about this family. Now, I will tell you, as I read the letter, I'm just like, wow, I didn't know we were that amazing. and it's really wonderful to have a gracious and grateful letter to be written about you. As I looked and thought about this as a letter about, if you were going to receive this as a letter about the family that Jesus is talking about in the parable, you would kind of go, oh, this is one of those crazy Christmas letters that's telling you a lot more about the family than you really wanted to know. And sort of the passive-aggressive and backhanded things that are going on in this letter. I mean, think about it. Now I'm going to get into my defense of oldest son. Here is a father who clearly had some goods, and when the first son came to him and said, I want to have my inheritance, the father sells half of what he has and gives it over to the son, and then the son wanders off. And then when the son comes back, not only does he throw a feast, but think about this, folks, he doesn't even tell the older brother that they're having a feast, why don't you come by? The older brother is out in the field working diligently and doing all these things. And as we get to read in this conversation, here's what the son says to the father. For all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I've never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. This kid is diligent, hardworking, and seems like he did not get that sense that he was valued or seen. It's really kind of poignant. And if, as we are often told, when we see these central figures in the parables, a king, a father, we're supposed to think about God. If this is God, maybe this isn't the kind of God we want. But there's more. And this is where it gets really hard, because those who are oldest children or dutiful children, whatever your birth order, and you've done all the right things that mom and dad have said, and you've done the checklist, and you've gone to the right college, and you've gone out there, and you're feeling like maybe mom and dad didn't notice, it's a really hard thing to read this particular story and say, man, I'm on Jesus' side. Now, if you're a prostitute or a sinner or a tax collector, I can see, wow, I am welcome back. But the older son is standing outside the party that he has not been invited to, and he's a little hacked off. And then the father says something to him that I think we need to listen to. And it's still hard, but I think we need to listen to it deeply. Then the father said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. That's a lot. You are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. And this gets into something that I may be unorthodox about in the church. I know there are all sorts of passages that tell us about pecking orders and reward systems in heaven. And I think that at some level that's probably true. But I think at another deep level, what this story says about God, if this is a story about God, is God fills the holes that you have. And the holes that you need to have filled, not simply give you what you want. there's a difference between these two brothers. One was recalcitrant and a profligate and went off and did all the things, and he needed to have himself welcomed home. You heard that when he came to himself, that's where he went back, was to home. And yeah, he had been horrible. For all you older, dutiful siblings, yep, he doesn't get off that. The Father gave him what he needed, the welcome home. Now you have the older, dutiful son who's never been invited to the party and has never thrown a party. And he stands outside this feast and is looking in, and guess what, folks? Jesus does something that infuriates me from storytellers. He leaves us to fill in the blanks. We do not know what happens to the older son. I like my Hollywood movies with nice, tight endings. I am an American in that way. We don't like vague and open-ended closings to the story. And yet, this is what we have. You have a father who could rejoice that a son that was lost to him was able to come home and he could embrace him. And he also has a son who's been incredibly dutiful to him, and he wants him to know that he's part of this too. Now it's hard because if I look at this letter, it looks like a lot of work may have been lost somewhere along the way, or attitudes by the two sons were developed early on and they couldn't see what was right in front of their eyes. For those of you who are the dutiful type, there's all sorts of reason to be outraged in this world. We encounter it daily. In fact, we live, I think, in a culture right now where outrage is the primary emotion that we experience. I deserve, I get, I am. And of course, we're never going to be satisfied. One of the things that this tale sets in tension is whether or not we have enough to eat and drink and to live well by, and whether or not we have enough of a relationship to really get a purpose and joy for life. I do think that counter my economic upbringing, God lives in a world where there are no scarce resources, and invites us to live in that same world, not only in the relational part, but in the actual part. Is there enough in this world to feed everybody, to give them a house? I think we're challenged as people of God to be engaged in that work. And I also think we're challenged by God to be engaged in the work to understand that there's enough love to go around. The loving father, or the negligent father, or whatever you want to call him, however you read this story and encounter it, had enough for the prodigal and enough for the dutiful sons. So abundant that he could just keep giving himself away to them, and they would get more and more. It's not a competition to be in relationship with God. It's not a pecking order. God's grace and love is sufficient to the extent of abundant. Yep, Jesus is talking to Pharisees and scribes, trying to tell them, look, I'm not beating up on you. But the people sitting around me, the tax collectors and sinners, they have a great need right now. They need to know they belong. And I understand that you grumble. Let me tell you this story. And it's a love letter. It's a love letter to the prodigal, and it's a love letter to the eldest son. And here's the question: what is the eldest son going to do? As somebody said, maybe the name for this story should be, when you come to a fork in a road, take it. What's the son going to take in that fork? Is he going to walk into the party and be satisfied that, yeah, the father meant exactly what he said? Or is he going to continue to be angry in a justifiable way, outraged at the injustice drawn on him? I don't have an answer to that question, but this is a Lenten challenge to everybody. We talk about giving things up and adding things on. Let me give you an add-on discipline. Review your relationships. Where are they broken? Where do they need mending? Where do they need holes filled and gaps covered over? Not to hide things, but to bring things out and to enhance things. To become part of the kingdom of God in its fullness. Because God has made us to love one another and to be in relationship with one another. And where they're broken and torn apart, it's really hard. I told you the story of my mother-in-law. I will tell you she was amazing at creating relationships. She valued all three sons-in-law, and we all took different courses. The only thing she was jealous about is that we treat her daughters with care, respect. And we tried. In that letter, no backhanded compliments or anything. She just told the straight and skinny truth. She was also proud of her grandchildren, not in some really weird way, but in the way that they are becoming who they were made to be by God. And that just made her so excited. And that's what God offers, even in this letter and this parable about these two sons, one of whom seems to get all the breaks and the other who seems to get broken. But the truth of the matter is God has enough for everyone in what they need, if not always what they want. And the challenge as we move forward in Lent or Easter or any time of year is how do we make those relationships deeper, more meaningful, and to know and hear the affirmation that the Father gave to his eldest son. All that I have is yours. The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound." Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, "Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends." But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. Then the father said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found." The Gospel of the Lord.